Welcome to You Are Intuitive. I am so delighted to have you here as I host candid, intimate, and grounded conversations with some of my favorite people around developing and using intuition in the real world. I am Dana Mahachek, and my guest today is Casey Campbell from Today is Magical. Casey is a certified theta healer practitioner and teacher, a heart presence activator, and creator of the self-published inspirational book, I See Hearts Everywhere. Her journey into self-love and awakening of the heart began with a heart of pure light that appeared when she took a random photograph in 2007. There was no logical explanation for the heart shape, and it was the first of many, many more heart photos to follow. Since then, Casey has followed her heart as much as possible and has dedicated herself to being the clearest conduit for divine healing that she can be. She helps people shift limiting beliefs and to remember the magic of life, the magic of the heart, and the magic that we are. You can find Casey online as well as every 2 weeks on her News for the Soul talk radio program. I am so overjoyed to feature Casey today, and I know that you will love hearing about her experiences just as much as I do. Thank you again for being here. All right. Hi, Casey. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Hi, Dana. It's an honor and a pleasure.
I am tremendously excited to speak about intuition with you. And I guess the first thing I'd like to ask you is if you consider yourself to be intuitive.
It's an interesting question because, there's that sigh because do I? You know what's funny, and I think this happens for me with intuition. I know it does with other people as well, but I think it happens for me many times across the board. I guess what I do all the time is totally about intuition. When you do an intuitive body scan, you are using your intuition. I don't really think about it. I just think, that's not psychic, or other people are super psychic. That's my expression for people that I feel are really psychic. And what that means to me, I guess, is more, the type of people who are really telepathic. They're picking up on so much information about everybody. I don't do that. And I think what I came to realize is I purposely don't do that. But in the early days, I was really judging that. Like, why can't I do that?
Yeah.
What intuition is to me, right? But I know I am very intuitive because this is what I do with people all the time. But I think I think it is easy to compare.
Yeah.
And always find somebody who's more, like I say, that's my expression, super psychic.
Super psychic. Yeah. Well, and it's, you bring up an interesting point with that. The fact that intuition it's so normal and it's so everyday and it's so kind of obvious that you don't even think about it, or you don't even consider yourself as intuitive, because it's just this is just who I am. This is me being me.
Yeah.
But then having those perceptions or those ideas of the supercharged intuition, or the people who are on a different level of intuition than you.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit more about what would make someone get to that next level? These ideas, whether or not they're real, but just these perceptions that you have and that I have about what makes someone super psychic compared to just intuitive.
So I noticed for myself, it's half of what you just said. I guess the fact that I am intuitive, I don't notice it, so I don't realize because it's happening all the time. Then there's the flip side. The other half is a lot of the time I'm really consciously tuning in.
Yeah.
So if somebody asks me, whether it's a client or a friend,
Mm-hmm.
there will be times where I very consciously tune in and ask for guidance.
Yeah.
So I guess what I feel sometimes is like if I'm just chatting with somebody and they say, oh, what do you think about this? I'm not one of those people that will just already have that information about somebody else or whatever the person is asking, right?
Mm-hmm.
It really is mostly, I pick up on some information, but mostly I do need to consciously tune in. And I do that by closing my eyes and getting into that space where I know nothing is interfering, and then ask. And I guess in the past, there would have been a lot of judgment for me around that, where I felt like other people just have instant access to this.
Mm-hmm.
But I think being such an empathic person, I feel like I was always taking in a lot of information that way. So feeling
Sure.
a lot of information.
Yeah.
And like I say, I don't know, for me personally, everybody has different views on this, but for me personally, I don't want to, I just feel like it's kind of intrusive to know a lot of information about everybody who's just walking down the street.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I make that very clear to people. Say if I'm doing a session with somebody and maybe if they're a little hesitant, I often do make it clear that I'm really only tuning into what you feel comfortable with. I'm not getting a lot more than that, right?
You're not going through the underwear drawers.
I'm not. And I think I make that clear to people because I probably didn't want that either.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a weird feeling when you're around someone who's super psychic and you're kind of like, do I have to watch my thoughts? Like, it's interesting because I don't know that many people who are like that. So when you first come across somebody who is, it's an interesting experience.
So this idea that people who are super psychic have like instantaneous access to like all the information that they could possibly know about you and your thoughts and your feelings and your history and your sins or whatever. And this idea that if you can't do that, or if you don't have those abilities, then you're not super psychic. You're just intuitive, right?
Exactly.
Which I think is so interesting and so fascinating that we have these like frameworks and these rankings that are mostly unspoken and mostly unconscious, actually, that we mentally file and categorize ourselves and other people into like different levels of whatever it is, in this case intuition, on like a spectrum of like someone who's normally intuitive and someone who's like amped up psychic intuitive. But even when you're saying like, oh, if I'm tuning into a client and I'm like centering myself, I'm like, that sounds pretty super psychic to me.
I know, that's the funny thing is I think if I think of myself, say 10 years ago, I would definitely see myself as super psychic now.
Yeah, and it's these arbitrary, they're arbitrary levels and they're arbitrary ideas and beliefs about like what counts as intuition and what doesn't count, or what like would be extra intuitive. And I notice both in my own experience and with the clients that I've worked with, a lot of things that I now see as like that's intuition are just like swept away and discounted and discredited, like, oh, well, that's not intuition.
Right.
What intuition really is like being able to talk to spirits, or being able to read people's minds, or predict the future, or something. We all have these kind of gold standards of what counts as the super psychic. But for people who are just kind of dipping their feet into the waters and beginning to open that door of possibility of like, maybe I am intuitive, or maybe I can be intuitive or more consciously intuitive. Just recognizing that a lot of our normal everyday experiences are actually us being intuitive.
Sure. Yes.
How do you find your intuition works for you? Like, first of all, how do you connect, or how do you tune in?
Well, and that's what I was just thinking too, is that another way that I might have judged it in the past. So if you think of the clairs, right?
Yes.
I think the ones that I didn't feel I had, that's what I thought was super psychic.
So people who could hear voices, or which ones? See especially.
Yeah.
Because you are mostly always the sentient?
Yes. And so I felt like I could feel more and know more, and knowing just that, I just totally just, it was only when I'd be in a session with a client and I would just be talking and they'd say, it's really amazing that you mentioned this, because I didn't think at that point I was really, channeling or giving them guidance. I just thought I was just talking.
Stating the obvious.
Exactly. So that I find interesting, is that the things, that grass is always greener, that kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, so the thing for me, the way that I think I always was intuitive, but I didn't know that I was. And it's when I went to a class for theta healing.
Okay.
Yeah. And there is just a really simple formula for how you get into that space to meditate, to receive guidance, to do a scan of a body, or to talk to someone's guardian angel. It was so just a simple formula, and that's what I wanted, because I didn't think I knew how to do this, And that to me was really cool, because I felt like at the time I really felt out of my league. I felt like everybody else here has all these things in their spiritual toolbox. They've done breathwork classes or Reiki. I had none of that. I just felt like I'm just here because I felt like I was told to come here. Even that, I didn't really receive messages like that before. When you hear people say, oh, I heard this voice saying, go to New York.
Yeah.
Well, I did hear that, but it wasn't hearing exactly. It was kind of, it was
inner hearing,
seeing, hearing, knowing, all of that. Yeah. And it came 3 times in the same day, and I was like, I can't ignore that. I'm trying to ignore that, but I can't. So that's how it started. And I really was like so nervous, because I felt like I don't know how to do this, but I felt like that was a testament to that modality, because it was so clear and easy. Just follow these steps and you got it. And if you can do that when you're as nervous as I was, then it's a true testament. So then I guess after that, it was just practice, and just the more I did it, the more confident I felt with it. But it's like that little cosmic joke that here I was thinking, oh, now I'm getting better at it, and now I feel confident with it, so now I'm intuitive.
Yeah.
Well, before that, I don't think I would have been drawn to that class if I wasn't.
If you weren't already intuitive.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there are just so many ways, even, our gut feeling, all those little things that we don't maybe really see as truly intuitive, because it comes naturally to us.
Yeah.
Maybe that I felt like I needed something like, go here to this class, do these steps. That's very me. And that's why I think, because I have such an analytical mind.
Yeah.
Virgo. And
we're in Virgo season.
Exactly. And so I feel that's why I do like to consciously tune in, So when I'm getting guidance for myself, I don't like it to be just an abstract thing. I like to know that I'm truly tuning in and have certain signs that will show me very clearly, because if my mind starts working overtime, then I can easily doubt it, or I don't when I'm doing this for other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for myself, yes, I can really question, am I influencing this? Am I hearing this correctly? Yeah.
Yeah. Or am I just like steering it in the way that I
Yeah.
want it to go?
Yeah.
Like, am I, even with the pendulum, it's like, am I actively moving my hand to have it say a certain thing? Because that's just what I want to hear.
Sure.
That is actually a really interesting thread that I want to go deeper down with. That doesn't make any sense, but I want to follow that thread. This idea of it being easier to receive intuitive insights for somebody else compared to yourself. Would you say that that's usually your experience, that it's easier for doing it for others than it is for yourself?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Well, so with theta healing, the modality that I do, it's a lot about beliefs. Okay, so finding out limiting beliefs and changing them. So I think I had a lot of beliefs around, and maybe lots of healers do, maybe lots of people do, but not that there's a difference there, but just saying that just taking the healer thing out of the equation, I think coming from the family I came from, wasn't really encouraged to go to a psychic.
Yeah.
And I can understand that, because even now, I have mixed feelings about that. Like when I started working with clients, if people would come to me to really just have a reading, like to have me answer just a series of questions, that didn't feel right to me or like to me, because I really wanted to empower people, to find answers too for themselves, but also that it just wasn't my forte. I just felt like that's not my thing.
Yeah.
But definitely with my family, I would say that it wasn't encouraged to go to a psychic. And I did feel like, I want to just find out on my own, because if somebody plants a seed, maybe I'm just going to align with this thing that
like
maybe is accurate. Yeah.
Self-fulfilling prophecies.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I still kind of have mixed feelings about all of that. Can you remind me of what the question was?
Why do you think it's easier to read for other people compared to yourself?
So that's what I was going to say, is that I had some beliefs around maybe it's not right for me to have access to this information. I had a lot of beliefs of a lot of martyr type beliefs, or serving beliefs, that it's okay to do this for other people, not okay to do this for me.
Yeah.
And I had to change a lot of that, because it was kind of wearing me down, because there was just so much energy going out, not a lot of replenishing myself and actually using my gifts to, benefit
for yourself.
Yeah, which can be helpful for others as well. So I had to change a lot of those beliefs in a big way. And you were instrumental in helping me with that too, because I know when we met, I was really at that depleted mode from a lot of that. Overgiving and
definitely. And that is also, I have many things to say about this, but this idea, first of all, that it's okay to give to another person, but not okay to give that same energy to yourself, that also kind of puts you, or puts us, in a position where we have to go outside of ourselves for answers, or for whatever we're seeking, for love, for validation, for permission. If we're not able to turn our gifts and our skills inward and like apply those same modalities that we use on behalf of other people to ourselves, you give yourself the short end of the stick because you have to seek it elsewhere. And also, I find just with giving to others and with serving other people, compared to myself, I find that when it comes to, say, giving myself a reading or giving myself like energy clearing, for some reason, and it must just be because I am me and I am kind of attached to the identity and the idea of me, but it's so much easier for my mind to get a hold of whatever is coming through. And I guess because I'm not another person when I'm giving a reading to somebody else, I'm not attached to the outcome or like how things are going to unfold the way that I am for myself. Do you feel the same way?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I did sort of develop a way of receiving guidance for myself that feels foolproof for me. Now, I say that, but since you mentioned to me about this topic, I've been really looking into intuition and how I feel about it. And I am curious, like I say foolproof, right? And it's not about being a fool. I don't mean that.
Yeah.
But what I find interesting is I think, so as I was going to say a recovering perfectionist, once I started to be able to get my own guidance, I did feel like, oh, now I can bypass any potential mistakes.
Yes.
That's going to be perfect. Yeah. And that's where I do find it very curious that sometimes, whether we're getting the information for ourselves or from other people, I do feel that there are certain experiences we're meant to have, right? And if we go to get a reading about it, or we do the reading for ourselves, I feel that our intuition or somebody else's intuition will lead us in that direction to that experience, because it's all part of that package, right? If we're meant to go through that experience, this is how I feel about it anyway. So it makes me curious about the nature of intuition and what that really means for it to be correct.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, because that is just, I could talk about that for like 10 hours.
Sure.
This idea that, because I also shared that, I'm going to call it now a misperception, that like being intuitive means that you're not going to make mistakes anymore because you'll be able to bypass things that don't serve you or that are not aligned with you, that like your intuition is just always going to lead you down the highest path, which it does.
Yes.
But not in a way that's like you're never going to experience pain, or you're never going to experience loss or grief or all the human things. It's not going to like elevate you on some level where you're just going to like skim through the rest of your life. But I totally thought it would, and it seemed, in retrospect, it seems absolutely ridiculous to be like, that's what I believed. But even if it wasn't like a consciously, I probably never would have written that down, because as soon as you do, it looks ridiculous. But on some deep inner layer, that's what I thought, that intuition was kind of foolproof, and also that there would be no course corrections because you would like get it right the first time, and that you would also know, you'd have kind of the full map, right? That you would know where you were starting and know where you would end up and how to get there. And what I've found is that that's not the case at all, right? There's a lot of mind changing and a lot of adjustments and a lot of like tweaking and recalibrating and pivoting and correcting course. And it drives my inner perfectionist mad to just be like, I thought I had the answers, or I thought I was like developing this skill set to be able to bypass all of that.
Yeah.
And that's not the case at all.
Me too. And I didn't even want to go from the starting to ending up. I just wanted to fast forward to the results that I wanted. And that also created this kind of like a crisis of, well, what good is intuition? I felt, because once you feel like you're perfecting your intuition, everything is just lining up. And then all of a sudden you have this thing where, like you say, that something is painful, or it's like, how did I end up here?
Yeah.
I was trusting my intuition.
Yeah.
And then I started, I wasn't real happy about that. I felt like, well, now how do I trust my intuition? Because maybe it's going to steer me wrong.
Yeah.
So there's that little piece as well, and where you go from there.
Do you feel like, thinking about your own experience and maybe times where your intuition has led you astray or into the depths of a really painful or confusing or sad or frustrating experience, have you been able, in retrospect, at least in some of those situations, to find the gift in that or the medicine in that? Or are you still on the journey to finding the gift and the medicine in some of those?
It depends what day you're talking. But today I'll say, yeah, I've definitely found the medicine and the gift in that. And I realize, because I know myself, I would have tried to avoid those experiences.
Totally. Who wouldn't?
Yeah. And I think back to, well, someone I really admire is Panache Desai, and he would always say, once you maybe think that you'll get to a certain spiritual level and you'll just be enlightened and groovy and never have these things happen. But what he said is, life still happens. You will just respond to it differently, right? And that, I think, is very reassuring, because I did think that life wouldn't happen. Yeah, and then that can really set you up for more pain. And so I think, like I say, it does depend on the day, because there have been days where I felt like, how do I navigate after this? And can I trust my guidance? But I know I was trusting my guidance. Like I say, all I know is that it was steering me in the direction I was meant to go in, for the way that my soul is meant to evolve, and the other people involved in that situation. And as I say, if I didn't get that guidance, I probably would have done something else, and I would have skipped over something very important.
For you personally, when you're talking about like you're checking in and the guidance feels right, or the guidance feels true and aligned for you, what does that look like on like a physical level or a tangible level? What does alignment feel like to you? So I sort of developed my own little way of receiving guidance. So with theta healing, when we're checking in for subconscious beliefs, we often use muscle testing. Yes. Whatever form people use of that, right? Whether it's a standing up sway method, or they use their fingers, or whatever. But what I found is that, so like I said, I can easily receive clear guidance for clients or other people just in my mind. Yeah. But for myself, I found that really difficult to do. I would really question it. It was too abstract. Yeah. So one day I just said, I say the divine mostly. I would just say to the divine when I was tuning in for guidance, okay, so now I'm going to do muscle testing, but not for my subconscious beliefs. I want for the highest truth about this. Yeah. And so it's like using your body as a pendulum. So my body sways forward for yes and back for no. So
Well, one situation when I really started using this in a big way, you'll remember because you did a session with me about selling my house, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And when I was coming up with the price for that, and I had to, because you know how there can be a lot of negotiations going back and forth, and
Yeah.
you really have to go with your own guidance on that, because a lot of people will have their opinions, right? And they have a lot of statistics maybe to back it up.
Yeah.
But really it comes down to us in the end. And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, when I was going through that process, that's how I did it. And
Was using your body as a pendulum?
yeah.
Yeah.
And asking for the highest guidance about this, the highest truth. And it worked out in a really big way.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. And this is how I do this now, you know, for anything that I'm tuning in about. For me, it's very clear. My body will show me in a clear way. Sometimes I will just see it in my mind now because it's getting easier as I go along. But that's a way that I don't question it if I do that muscle testing.
Because my experience is that the mind can lead you anywhere, right? Anywhere.
Yeah.
But the body is really clear and succinct about yes, no. Like it's one or the other.
Yes.
And there's no hidden agenda with the body, I find, compared to the mind.
Yeah. Exactly.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. But with people who are beginning to just tap into their body as an intuitive tool and as an intuitive technology, how can they, first of all, establish for themselves what is a yes and what is a no? Or, you know, do people always lean forward for yes and always lean back for no? No. So how can they know for themselves what their body indicates as a yes and what their body indicates as a no?
So when we're doing it with subconscious beliefs, if I'm teaching a client how to do that, I'll generally get them to, so one thing we do first is get them to do an energy zip up so they're not combining energies or blending into, say, mine or somebody else's. And then, and do like a little energy break. And then we can just test it out by saying yes or no and see what the body does. And you're totally right. For some people, and it can be different on different days. Usually people do go forward for yes, but not always. And usually I give them a download of that muscle testing is easy and effortless. Because sometimes people, depending on how nervous they feel or whatever, they might be concerned that, well, what if I'm just making this happen, right?
Yeah.
And then we'll say a statement. So you can just say anything like, I live in Timbuktu. Well, if that's not true, your body will show that that's a no, whichever way that is. And then once you know which is your yes or no, then you can go through other statements. So when I'm doing it for my highest guidance, whatever the highest truth is and the highest perspective on something, I already know. For me, I've done so much muscle testing. It's my body's just so used to it. So I know that my yes is a forward. And it's usually, it's very clear for me with that when I'm doing it. There may be times where depending on what the subject is, I guess I might do it a second time. But it always ends up being, you know, the same. So,
and one of the other people I was speaking with for this series, his suggestion was to not even say a statement, but to like just sit with your body, close your eyes, and say yes, 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 and just see and feel how your body responds. And then get recentered and then just say no, no, no. And just start with just the words yes and no, and just to notice the subtle differences and how the body is responding, which I think is genius. Because I always started, I don't know why I settled on this, but my statements are, my name is Dana,
Yeah.
And my name is Bob. Those are like my two.
Yeah.
And I don't know why Bob. I don't know why. All I know
Okay.
is that my name is not Bob.
Right.
So those are my like yes, no statements. But when
Uh-huh.
he suggested just say yes and just say no, I was like, actually, that's kind of brilliant.
It's good stuff. Yes.
Here I am complicating it by adding names and statements and stuff. But
We can do that sometimes.
But I think one of the other things for people who are watching or listening and starting to develop this trust and this communication between like you and your body, I always find it really helpful whenever I am tuning into myself. I establish the baseline every time. So just because maybe I always did lean forward for yes.
Yep.
And rather than just assuming it's going to be the same that time or that day, I always start by saying, in my case, my name is Dana.
Yeah.
My name is Bob. And getting that baseline established every instance that I'm doing.
Yeah.
What I also really appreciate about what you're saying, Casey, is that you can set the framework and specify the parameters to say, I'm not testing for my subconscious beliefs here. I'm testing for the highest and best good, or the highest and best outcome.
Yeah.
I love that you can go on to it's just like a different layer of yourself, but you can specify that ahead of time. This is where we're going. This is what I want. This is the level or the layer that I'm seeking information or seeking guidance and insight on.
I think it's pretty cool too. And I will say that other theta healers would probably not recommend that because the muscle testing with theta healing is specifically for subconscious beliefs.
Yeah.
And those don't always reflect the highest truth, right?
Yeah.
We can know on a conscious level that we're lovable, but our subconscious might not have that belief. So, so it does amaze me that I can have different results and to set that parameter, but it works. So I just had to go, off the
had to go rogue
path a bit. Yeah, exactly. I did, because I felt like, well, I don't want to question my guidance anymore. I need to have some clarity with this.
Yeah.
So it worked for me.
Yeah. And that, I think, is bringing up a wonderful point that, you can be trained and certified even in a specific modality, or you can work with a specific healer or mentor or in a certain lineage. And even though you are in that practice or in that lineage, it doesn't mean that 100% of the time you need to have, adopt everything wholesale. That you do still need to find your own path and to like take what resonates and leave the rest.
I totally agree. Yeah. Great.
Sorry, I just have to adjust my position here.
Sure.
Getting my bum is falling asleep. So with people who are maybe kind of still feel like they're on the outside looking in, that's like, I'm on the outside of intuition and I'm like peering through this shop window, and the people on the other side are intuitive or have intuition or are like allowed to be intuitive. Are there specific, practices or resources or experiences that you could suggest for people to get on the other side of that window and to start building their own intuitive practice or connecting with their intuition more?
Well, like I said, with theta healing, there's a really easy meditation that we do with that just takes you into that space where you're in that theta brainwave, so you can hear the guidance a lot more clearly. So that's always great. But a class that I took, it's not an official theta healing class. It's called a crystal visioning class. So I'm sure you can find it through other modalities or whatever. But in that class, that was so cool because I always was drawn to crystals, but I didn't feel like I was getting as much from them as other people maybe did. I just felt like, oh, that's so pretty, and I have to have that one. But in that, so what happens in that class is you learn to be a practitioner, to lead other people through this, but you're also doing this in the class yourself, of tuning into past lives, parallel lives, future lives. And what you do is you tap into a quality that you'd really like to embody in this lifetime. And so in the lifetime that you tune into, that just comes in, because you set that intention for that quality, right? Of a time when you totally were rocking that. And it's amazing to see what comes in. But what you do in that class, so you have that crystal grid kind of set up. I don't know if it's 12 or 16 crystals on and around the body, on the chakras. And so there's a formula to setting that up. But what's neat is, and I've got a couple of these rose quartz spheres, and in this crystal visioning class, they're called drivers. So you have a little blindfold on so you can really tune into what you're seeing. And I really felt in that class like, oh my gosh, once they set that crystal setup in place, it's like, wow. But then if you have any trouble at all, like the practitioner is guiding you through it, asking you questions, but you're the one who's, seeing it all and answering your own questions. But if you have any trouble at all, these are called drivers, and you just move these back and forth with your hands. I cannot believe what that did. It was like the clarity just comes right in. And so ever since I took that class, I always keep these on my desk. And sometimes if I'm nervous, I'll have these in my hands, or if I just am feeling like I want to be, extra clear. If I want more clarity, I will do that motion or just hold them. And that is a tip that I recommend, because and they don't have to be rose quartz. I was just going to ask that. Yeah, they can be. I think there's something about having that spherical shape, but yeah, I was drawn to rose quartz. So that is a tip, because I always love holding crystals anyway, especially if I'm nervous. But these really do sort of amp it up. So I definitely recommend that. And like I say, even doing a crystal layout like that, having someone do that for you, that really changed things for me, because I don't know. And that's where I would say maybe even my intuition for myself is probably the strongest. When I took that class, I was amazed at how easily I could tune into those lifetimes. It was just a breeze. It was just like watching a TV show. It was so cool. Whereas in the past, I felt like I was always questioning things as I was learning how to do stuff. But with that, I did not question it at all. I just spewed it right out.
Yeah, because even like you saying that now, I'm like, past and parallel and future lives, like I don't know how to tap into that, or like I don't know how to do that. But maybe I need some drivers.
Hey.
And then like you were saying, like for people who are just starting, even just using your body as the baseline and asking yourself these like yes no questions and setting the parameters that this is for my highest and best good. Yes. And just seeing what your body says.
Yeah. And yeah, I totally recommend that. It's fun.
It is fun.
Try it out.
Playing with it and just experimenting. And the way what I wanted to tie that back to is the fact that your body isn't going to tell you the perfect answer from like here to infinity.
Right.
That just because something shows up as a really clear aligned yes right now, it doesn't mean that that's not going to change in the future. And if it does change in the future, it doesn't mean that you were wrong or incorrect before. It's just that things are changing now, and you can check in again and again and again for that inner resonance and for that inner alignment.
I think that's really important information. I think I learned it the hard way.
I think we're all learning it the hard way. It's like, I thought it was going to be different this time, that I had finally mastered the art of knowing the future forever.
Oh, from here to infinity. I love it. Yep.
Well, thank you so much for being here today, Casey, and for sharing your wisdom and your experience and just your practical recommendations for how people can start connecting with themselves.
Thank you, Dana. This is so cool and always so much fun to connect with you and to have this chat. It was an honor. Thank you.
And if people wanted to learn more about your work, or if they were interested in receiving a theta healing from you, where's the best place to find you online?
I'm at todayismagical.com and Today is Magical on Instagram and Facebook. Primarily Instagram.
Primarily Instagram. That's been most of the people I've talked with are like, not on Facebook. Find me on Instagram.
I had a feeling.
Yeah. Well, I'll put the links to that below the show in the notes.
Thanks.
And just thank you again so much, Casey.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Bye for now.
Thanks. Bye-bye.